Hello and welcome to Halton Garden Week 2022. This is our final day, day 4. My name is Helen Stevenson. I'm the program manager at Halton Food. I'm pleased to welcome Amanda Smith and her talk, Climate Change and Food Systems. As a graduate of Manitoba University in 2004, Amanda walked bravely into her future with her degree in Russian literature and Holocaust studies to become a farmer. And after a 12-year adventurous journey, Amanda is an accomplished agricultural and horticultural specialist and a gardening master in the Fraser Valley. From farm apprentice to farm owner, then master gardener, specialty floral designer, and educator, she enjoys researching plant health, growth patterns, pests and diseases, and greenhouse growing. Her true passion is teaching, from school kids through the Nature's Classroom program, to farmers in the field, to ordinary citizens who want to grow their own food. Amanda has also spent years in the garden center and the nursery field as well. An avid supporter of community gardens, she has managed several in Langley, BC, including Maples Discovery Garden and the Langley Learning Farm. Now the Agriculture Stewardship Coordinator at the Langley Environmental Partner Society, she plans agricultural events and educational group workshops, school curriculum, and one-on-one support to the Langley community around farm and garden sustainability and food security. So thank you very much for joining us, Amanda.
Thank you so much. Yes, that was a bio that was written for, I think it's been 2 years ago. So I'll have a quick additional one that's very, very quick to add to that particular one. But I just want to welcome you all to today's topic, which is climate change and food systems in Canada. So for this particular talk today, I'm a contractor for Seeds of Diversity, and they are a national organization within Canada that is essentially one that supports seed security, and essentially seed security is linked to food security within Canada. And you can see by the subtitle in my presentation here that this is a revised presentation from my last year presentation for Seeds of Diversity, where I had touched pretty much on the basics of the true basics of climate change and how people can understand it, and not going into the true science of it. And today I still will not, but at the same time, because this is more of a national presentation, and I pretty much touch on the 3 tiers of governments within our country, which is going to be 1 federal, 2 provincial, and then 3 municipal. And as such, the bio had said that I work for environmental organizations. So you may find that I'm going to be touching on some environmental stuff that is within our wheelhouse and are growing within at least our municipal systems and our provincial. So welcome to today. Because this is a presentation on climate change and food systems in Canada, I want to start out with a very positive, in my mind and in a lot of the prairie minds, that flooding in Manitoba specifically. So this is a scene of flooding in Neepawa, Manitoba, more in the southern area, some flooding that they see within their own province over the last several decades. As people who may be seeing this, who live in Manitoba, they are used to seeing it. This is a positive, more of a positive scene. People think, oh, this is quite negative because it's flooding. It's not localized flooding. This is something that happens, every time, not just because of, rains or, specific waterways that just seem to get a little bit more overflowing. This is typical snowpack that starts to melt over time. And this, I will be mentioning things like groundwater and surface water in this presentation. So if you do have a pen and paper, you may want to make some notes, because this is a very quick presentation on everything from, the level 1 gardener to an advanced gardener, and within all of our provinces, and with weather and food. So a very big topic. So please make some notes. You can put some questions in the chat. We're only here for about an hour, but I've asked for an extended time in case you do have some questions that we can't cover throughout the presentation. So what I had mentioned is I gave a presentation last year with Seeds of Diversity, and it is actually on their YouTube channel. And like this one, that one was hard to give for across Canada. So you can view it on their Seeds of Diversity channel, but this is kind of a highlight of what I had given in that presentation. So I did give a review of how climate change is defined. I actually showed a plant hardiness zone map, which is one that the federal government does provide in their website. And a note here is what a lot of people don't know is that that particular map changes every single year, and it typically changes in the month of March to April, when a lot of our employees for the federal government can get to it underneath that environment umbrella. But it changes every year, and it always is regarding the winter prior. So let's say I'm going to be showing a map today that is from 2021. The results actually for that map was the winter of 2020. So it always is a year lagged, because it takes time to do a lot of the research and the polling stations to combine all of that data that they had registered across the country. I also gave last year a few tips on, just with mitigating in unexpected weather. Now, some of these are really basic topics that I know we've all heard of already, but I did mention the topic about raised beds. Raised beds doesn't mean the actual, wooden garden beds that are raised. Anything that's mounted or elevated at least, I want to say 6 inches, but that could be obviously in centimeters because we're in Canada. It's more or less like the 12 centimeters. So just simply raise up your garden bed. And of course, we probably know why. We want to make sure that the root systems in our early crops are outside of that, any kind of water rot for our root system or our bulbs. And I also highlighted again heavily on water collection systems. This is a big thing, because as our weather changes throughout our provinces and our growing areas, that we do notice there are going to be some bouts where we'll get, some heat waves, and then all of a sudden we get cold, and then we get rain. So it's very unexpected weather, but having water collection systems, if it's somehow anchored or attached to a roof, you're going to use that water regardless. So it's good to invest in it now, but really those are going to be the key for off times where maybe we don't have a connection to water, or we have water restrictions. And I also said very, very strongly that we need to be starting to take notes throughout the season, or photos. Take photos of your plants, photos of your rows, and then also take notes on anything when it comes to weather, what did well, when did you plant it. It's really good for you to have your own guide and note system for you to look back on previous growing seasons, because things will probably never quite always be the same, but you can still refer back and they won't change very dramatically. But it's good to have these notes, because I introduced another word last year where people were very confused, and it was it was a word that people had heard before, but they didn't know really how to define it, and it's the word microclimates. And if you want to hang with me through this presentation, I have a slide just on that. So because this also is a presentation for Seeds of Diversity, which is a national organization for seed saving and seed security, I think that no matter how we can think about the current climate and where it will go and our local food systems, the number one thing should be seed saving, and it always should be. And I know that let's say within the province of British Columbia, COVID really had an impact on growing. We had many more people enter into the gardening, horticultural piece, and they just want to grow their own food, just because of obviously, some of the reality that we were experiencing when COVID happened. And within that, prices on seed is going up, and it's because these seed companies can't keep up with demand. Also, again, I had to kind of break down and decipher the two themes of this presentation. So I could have a whole presentation on climate change, and then one on food systems. So I'm trying to do my very best within every gardener and small farmer in Canada to mesh them together. So I hope that that will make sense. So if you do have any questions on some things that I've mentioned within this presentation, please put them in the chat and we'll see if we have time definitely to get to them. But I have a funny feeling there's going to be. So in addition to adding to that bio that Helen had said, I have something more additional because of some of the stuff that had happened through our climate in terms of wildfires and flooding within British Columbia. My role with my non-for-profit environmental organization had changed a little bit in 2021. So I'm simply just updating you with the fact that my role switched completely now to outreach to local residents and farmers on sustainable practices. That's what we had to do through education. Still, even though we had mentioned some of the programming that I do, we had expanded that to local farmers. And I also had to rebrand our farmers and something else to add, which some folks listening to this recording or even this live presentation may also sympathize with, is that I had to resume some work that I had done and my organization had done about 7 years ago regarding outreach to landowners for their wells, and the new BC mandate to have all of their groundwater legislation and registration forms filled out. And because of that flooding, we have to start really doing some more measurements on E. coli and fecal coliform in a lot of our creeks and streams just because of the flooding. But with that being said, it still is the simple fact that I've been experienced in a lot of soils, different ones to grow food. And that's how I can safely say with some confidence that there are some hope attached to a lot of the growing that we're doing in our own areas, no matter what province you're in and what soil you have. So this is the plant hardiness zone map that I had shown. This one is slightly different than the one I had shown, of course, last year, because there are some slight changes to it. And if you have any questions regarding those changes, of course, the federal government can give you some updates as to why, and that would be through the Ministry of Environment. But this is very key to know that this particular growing zone map or plant hardiness zone map is more or less made up of where to plant trees. So if you think about, if you go to a garden center or a wholesaler and you want to buy some trees for your growing area for whatever project you have, the zone that's attached to it is more or less for trees. But with that being said, if we think about more of our annual crops or our food bearing crops, our berries, or our trees, well, fruit trees can still probably be the same to this growing map, but I'm thinking more about like our local gardens. You can probably work with these growing areas a little bit, or these zones regarding the microclimates. So stay still tuned for that. But a lot of folks within, I would say the province of Ontario, when I showed this map, is that they had some issues with exactly where they were located and what zone was attached to their area. So if we take a look at, and just so for people who are new that are viewing this, if you were to see, let's pick zone 3B, so it's in that green area, so it's obviously more the lighter green, that's more of a sage or grass or green. You would probably take a look to see exactly where that green would sort of match up within the country. I just have all of you down in my bar right here, so I can't really focus too much on the eastern provinces, but I think you can probably get my idea that even if we go to the zone 6B, zone A, and zone 7B, you'll start to notice where it gets into the red areas and the oranges, which are intermittent throughout the country, maybe not be located specifically on this map, because we know now that it is mostly for tree planting, but it's a very good guide. So this is something that is on all of our food bloggers, like if you think about all of the blogs that we have across Canada, especially within your area, or gardening blogs, they usually do refer to this map, because they want you to be educated when you go into garden centers, or you are doing seed saving, or you're propagating plants. It's a good thing if you're going to be selling your plants to realize that, okay, listen, I need to be really careful about what kind of plants I'm propagating. Especially if we know this is trees, these are for outdoor plants, not greenhouse plants, not ones with heated greenhouses or in full sun dispositions. That's a very different thing. So I hope everybody understands a little bit more about this map and what some of the variables that come into it. So again, outdoor trees, nothing in a greenhouse, and again, with our microclimates, things can change. So this is something that I really, really feel very strongly about. This is how we can start to, we say this term, mitigate some of our growing areas in terms of crops. And I talk about microclimates. Now, a lot of other garden bloggers, I'm not a blogger myself because I do work for official organizations. I'm thinking now, after 2-3 years of presentations, I probably should have my own blog, but microclimates are a very, very distinct, important thing to understand. And with local developments coming up within our own municipalities and our own neighborhoods across the country, we need to understand that microclimates evolve, adapt, and change. And that's why, again, I had said before, always make notes or take photos. So my first point on this particular slide is hedges. So I know from when I did my talk in Toronto, they wanted to know examples of hedges they could have within their own area. I will say, if you go to a garden center in the month of May or in the month of June, and you just visited without talking to any horticulturalist on site, you see what's in their inventory within your area, whether you're in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, or Newfoundland. Whatever they have in their garden centers for hedges is what is going to be more local, that grows within that area, and that can handle it. So for the province of BC, most of the hedges here are cedar and laurel. We're having problems with cedar hedges now because of climate change, and especially newly planted hedges with cedars, because they are water hogs when you first plant them, and laurels can be a little bit more adaptable. So that's within the southern area of British Columbia. But if you have questions about hedges, visit a garden center. But the thing with hedges is they're fantastic because it slows airflow down. So if you're in a really windy area and you want to start to maybe have a bit of a windbreak, which is something that we do know across Canada, windbreaks are great, but it slows down airflow, and that can help you in a microclimate. You have a lot of leaves here and wind is trying to get through. The wind will get through, but it won't be a firm gust. So you can still hold in some of the air that's there, which is important for your own personal plants in terms of your food. Also, I mentioned about development, and this comes into houses and homes being built too close together. So if you think about a house or a new development that's come in, that is a solid wall or a block where air cannot pass through. And we can think about maybe fences that are solid wood or concrete. And in this case, it would be concrete walls or walls for homes and townhouses. So those walls create a complete air block and air cannot flow through. So if you were, let's say, having a property and you had a backyard or a balcony that you were doing your own growing for your food, one year it was fantastic. For many years it was great, you had no problems, and then all of a sudden this new development comes in and there are now homes with walls, and you may notice that you may have an increase of bugs that attack your plants, or the simple fact that they're not growing the same as what you remember. So this is another thing about a change in your environment that can affect your microclimate. So if I haven't defined already, microclimates are essentially an area of growing where your plants are happy, they're green, they're lush, they're producing well, and it's essentially a happy place. If you think about your own environment and your own home, that's an extension of the environment to outside. This is all affecting that particular, flora and fauna environment. And if you notice changes, these are some of the reasons. Also, shelters that cover and block rains and snow, those are important too. So if you had this lovely area where you're growing your food and you didn't have issues, again, like, potentially like a new fence or a new development that's close by, or a cedar hedge, anything like that. If you just had some shelters, let's say gazebos or tents or like canopies overhanging, that can help cover and protect your plants. These are they're very different from each other, but they all have something very much in line. And before I keep going, the photo that you're seeing right now was taken in the month of December, where southern British Columbia had quite a bit of snow. And there's a hummingbird feeder that showed in that slide. And this is taken from a friend's place, and she has 8 hummingbird feeders that essentially really is her lifeline of her yard. And she has the best shrubs. She has some hedges, but she also has wonderful trees, and she feeds and is dedicated to those bird feeders twice a day, even in the winter, even in the summer, to give food for their hummingbirds. But it's just an environment that these pollinating birds are there, and it's a wonderful ecosystem. So that may be a hummingbird haven. You can still create that in your own area if you are concerned, but again, we want some biodiversity of our pollinators everywhere we go, and that's where, again, microclimates are very important. So I'll hit on trees. So trees are very important. They not only create a canopy for shade, they also create a cooling kind of mechanism. So if you had a tree that had just projected shade down, if it was deciduous or if it's evergreen in the summertime, any plants that is within that area would feel the cooling effects of that shade, even if they're not directly in that shady area. So it just is essentially a cooling system. And also, trees are one of those things where their root system really will bring in some of that water. They'll hold it. And also they do that wonderful thing about photosynthesis. And we know anything green out there produces photosynthesis for our air quality, but trees is such an important thing, at least for shade. Another thing too with microclimates, which is linked to biodiversity, is having water fountains and bird baths there. If you have to replace your water, or even if it's frozen and you let it thaw throughout the day, you will not see your own pollinators visit it, but they will. So again, having the right airflow, water, a little bit of shade, will help you with creating a microclimate that can actually defy that plant hardiness zone map. So you can literally say in your own area, you could have a wonderful plant zone, which could maybe be, zone 6, but then in your area attached to that tree map, that plant hardiness zone map, you're slated for a zone 5. So this is how through microclimates, people can be different from block to block, area to area, and it's some of these systems. So really, this is a note from 2021, which I hope people will probably laugh. I'm hoping they're going to laugh at personally inside, is this particular photo or text was one that was sent from the province of British Columbia, and specifically Vancouver Island. And it was sent to quite a few people in Manitoba, because this one was taken in the month of December. So in December it actually was Christmas Eve, Vancouver Island got a dump of snow that they have never seen before. And in some cases, because Vancouver Island is quite rocky, so they have different elevations that received different snowpack levels. It was impossible to drive anywhere. And Christmas, well, anywhere between Christmas and New Year's, everybody's lives was shut down. So we say it tongue in cheek, but in the month of December across Canada, when we were to look at all of the different weather patterns across the nation, it was so different, to the point where this particular quote was brought up and it's been active for about 6 years on social media. So dear the rest of Canada, it appears you've misplaced your snow. Not to worry, we have found it and would love to give it back to you. Our place is not equipped to handle it, so it is making a mess everywhere and getting into everything. Please come as soon as possible to get it. Now, this may be signed Vancouver Island, and you can see that it's been changed because this one was originally just Vancouver, and because of climate change, things are starting to move out a little bit closer to our ocean areas, and they're getting more of the seasonal exasperated weather that they're not quite used to. And this was really funny because in the province of Manitoba, especially in southern Manitoba, where they really rely on some degree of flooding, they hadn't received any snowpacks yet. And that's where we start to realize finally that our provinces are experiencing different weather. So all of those folks that may not really believe in climate change and how weather systems are changing, this is a testament to that. So I do want to start on a review of the year, and I've done my best. So I had said to Helen before we started recording today for the Halton Environmental Network that I did dip my toe, even though I do live in southern British Columbia, which you may think that I'll just talk about British Columbia and weather and food systems the entire time. I'm really not. I don't want to do that for everybody who's viewing this presentation. So across the nation, we are really thinking about what happened this year. And when it comes to at least our national food system, this is very important, at least to recognize if you hadn't known it already. So we had the heat domes of summer. So heat domes can be essentially defined as an increase in temperature within a specific area over a period of time that is uncharacteristic, that causes damage. Now, the photo we have on this screen here is a raspberry with sun scorch and obviously leaf curl, which again is just a simple fact. It was so incredibly warm. Heat domes, every province has their own specific normal temperatures when it comes to heat in the summertime, but southern British Columbia does not ever experience anywhere between 45 to 49 degrees. And that heat dome and that amount of heat made us lose a town, which is the town of Lytton, British Columbia, because of just the fact that it was dry, so incredibly dry that there were forest fires. Again, I'm going into the wildfires, and also sun scorching on plants. So we actually had our blueberry crop. If we notice throughout the winter time of this year, or also in our frozen products that we do see in our freezer section across Canada, if we see an increase in frozen berries, it's because of these heat domes, because Abbotsford, British Columbia, which is where I am located, is essentially the raspberry capital of Canada. And this is what had happened in the month of July. So we also had flooding in not only just British Columbia, but also Nova Scotia and also east. And I may say east, but Ontario has had their areas of localized flooding, but the major devastation obviously has hit the news, and we can see some of the photos if we watch the media. But it's very important to note that flooding is starting to become more common in other areas of our country, not just in the ones that we're used to seeing. Windstorms is very important, especially if they're in conjunction with wildfires. We saw many windstorms across the country, again, not just in the province where I live. And also, I will say again, in the prairies, there was reduced precipitation and very mild temperatures. And I will even say the mild temperatures were also in eastern provinces. And I have a slide up here for the Greater Toronto area. It was quite mild in the month of December. So a lot of these points were essentially made throughout the growing season. So we think about, starting in June and all the way to January. up and down temperatures in eastern provinces. This is one of the other things I'm going to add. If you're near a lake district, or if you have a strong microclimate, now that you know where to kind of look for some of those indicators if you're in one, that's going to be really important for you to understand the up and down temperatures, because that will affect your overall sort of environment. So some people have noticed that it's, it's a little bit warmer than normal. And I'll make more notes on that as we go through the presentation. But I also will say that transportation was interrupted. We all can have a comment on that right now, but specifically when it comes to climate, when you have anything from flooding and wildfires, that does start to break down some transportation links and issues for food accessibility across the country. But I also want to hit on some vocabulary, because if this presentation is specifically designed for people across Canada within every sort of, beginner growing to small farm or very advanced growers, there are some things that I've already said within the presentation that I just want to make sure you're aware of. So we have the heat domes that I mentioned. A new one is that fecal coliform, which I think is going to be one that's harder for people to understand. Fecal coliforms is essentially fecal or E. coli runoff from flooding from local meat producers within your area. We're having a large problem with that right now within the southern British Columbia area, to which we have to do water quality testing, because our neighbor in the US is having some problems with their waterways. And what we know, whatever is here in the water flows down, and that is the pattern. So fecal coliform is going to be very important, and especially if we think about our food systems and food recalls. If there is an E. coli breakout, let's say with a certain lettuce packet in California or somewhere else, we can probably have more of an understanding as to why, and this is where it comes from. So I'm giving the example I've already stated from our local flooding, but that can just due to other environmental or farming practices within our food systems. So atmospheric river was another one. I had heard of that one until this past 2021, when I know radio stations start calling me on localized flooding and new terms, and they're trying to understand it too. This is one that's new to the country. I'm still trying to find clarification on point 4, which is, I'm calling it Rex X right now, and I'm pretty sure it's Rex B, but I'm trying to do more research on that. And that has to do with fog lasting over a week or into 2 weeks. So it's extreme fog to the point where you don't have a lot of sunshine, and at least some clear viewing. So fog lasting for a long time, that's where humidity catches in and it is socked in. So that's starting to happen a little bit more. In the last few weeks of January, we were in southern British Columbia, we were under a fog warning, and normally people think that it's just always cloudy here anyway. Fog is different than cloud. And then this whole thing about carbon sequestration. So I know that this is a term that is not, I put it under new vocabulary. It's not new to everybody, and I wanted to still put it in here because it can still be a brand new term for some other people. And this is a way where we can be responsible in terms of our wetlands, our farms, our riparian areas when they're attached to our urban areas, of carbon sequestration, which is literally the fact of capturing carbon dioxide and storing it into our plants, which, and we know that carbon dioxide is the output of a lot of greenhouse gases. But by the time that we actually start investing within our own municipalities with local tiny forests, or restoration of our wetlands, or the addition of plants or new gardens and growing new trees and having more shrubs that are native. And this is where my environmental hat goes on. Carbon sequestration through these plantings and these environments are very, very important. So I'm going to just go back to this slide, which isn't very fun, but it still is one that I think everybody across Canada has seen, for at least British Columbia to take the news news weather headline for November for 2021. And this is flooding that happened within Abbotsford, British Columbia, but this is a simple scene that also can be taken for the rest of British Columbia that did also experience some flooding in the Okanagan and Coquihalla area. Some people watching this presentation may know some folks in that area that have some stories that were very unique to them. I like to take this shot because you can see that a lot of the flooding was down lower. So this particular area was below sea level, and it used to be a lake at one point that was drained. And of course, when we think about our water, there's a lot of wonderful local elements for our soils in there, which can be great for growing food. That's particularly what happened quite a few years ago. This flooding issue that happened here wasn't the first time. It happened over 30 years ago. But I wanted to show you the fact that this is definitely within a valley. And while I can be proud to take, as a BC resident, to take the award for the news headline for Canada, for weather, I'm not very proud of it. And a lot of us aren't, because it's one of the first times that we've been very affected by our weather, and this is going to be one of them, and it could be we could be getting more of them. So what I want to show you this particular photo, because you can see that it's in a valley. So within other areas of the country that are viewing this presentation, think about the valleys, because again, water flows down, and that's where the water collects. So if you think again about some of the areas that you have in your local area, water that pools is very important for you to realize if it also is extended to your growing area. So within at least the meat industry, we're going to be having probably an increase in price. And this is where I bring in food systems, is that weather does affect food prices. And within our local beef, chicken, and pork, at least within British Columbia, but also you may see it if we do a lot of imports from, exports from BC to other provinces, you'll start to see a slight increase in price. So if we do have enough people, and if you feel that you would like to engage in the chat, you can. I did have a slide here that you can make a comment in, and I want you to guess what province that these two photos are from. And I wanted to include this because I had to do a lot of research when things come up in the media and in the news. That may be the hot topic of the day, but it is not consistent throughout our news coverage. And so if you do feel comfortable to type them in the chat, where do you think this province is? Okay. So we have two guesses. Anybody else want to throw in? Okay. All right, we've got three. Great. Okay. So both of these photos were taken from Digby, Nova Scotia. So Digby, Nova Scotia has experienced quite a bit of flooding, and I know it could look like a scene from Quebec, New Brunswick, anywhere in Canada, and that's my point of this quiz, is I really wanted you guys to start to throw out some comments about what province you think this is from, because I think people could be surprised. So again, we have streets closed. That could be within any province, unless you really know this vista and this view, you'll understand exactly where it is. But so these were taken from Digby, and also the tree trunk here that we're seeing was snapped right at the base of it. And you might think about some of the wind that was there, which brought down these power lines. So I did quite a bit of research, and I had to find these photos. So I did see photos in New Brunswick. I did see some photos, in other areas. Please don't get me wrong. This presentation was 4 months worth of work, compounding on a previous presentation that given last year. So when we start to take a look at some of these areas in Canada, they are very local to us. And I wanted to still show you what can happen, because this did not make, federal news. It didn't. I had to search for it. But then when I did, I was quite impressed. But I'll show you a quick little snippet of a screenshot that I had taken of the Greater Toronto area. And even though Halton, you may not be within that area and you may think about some different things within your own either zone or your temperatures given for Sunday, January 16th, which is this year. These are the snapshots and the days. And now you can tell by this screenshot and all the other tabs I had open for this presentation. You can see the polling station here. And then also the weather network, which is a weather.gc.ca. So knowing that our polling station is Toronto Pearson International Airport, this is again needing to service the greater GTA area. And some folks may be like, yep, that's the weather that we had on that specific, day, and the wind chill was -20. And then it gives that forecast. And the reason why I wanted to bring it up, so now I have gone from British Columbia, well, I started in Manitoba, went to BC, then went out to Nova Scotia, and now I'm back to the Greater Toronto area. The reason why I had wanted to do this screenshot is because some people really do not agree with some of the temperatures because of, polling stations. And that's why I talked about microclimates. But at the same time, we think about, what was the weather in December for the Greater Toronto area? And I had some friends who had some family members from Mississauga come out, and they had visited during Christmas. And we had an Arctic airflow here, and it was -15 with a wind chill of -20. And a lot of folks don't really know about those temperatures because they think about southern British Columbia is so mild, but it's not. It's becoming very up and down and volatile. This is where I wanted to really show, because they came here and they were absolutely freezing. They expected a warm little Christmas holiday with their family, and they were not prepared because of the cold temperatures. And I had made a quick look about Mississauga on Boxing Day when I had seen them, and it was +2 degrees. So I'm not saying that there is a common sort of thread about the base of the temperatures in the Greater Toronto area, but you can see by this that I'm hitting on this mini Chinook idea where it can literally go from -15 to -5, -2, and there are some lows, but it can be a bit of a swing, which I'm noticing. Now you may think, well, I've kind of experienced that already, but if we go into historical data, let's say attached to this particular polling station, this is a little bit out of the ordinary. And this is where I want to go back to that previous slide and to our own provinces to know that you guys are really not alone. None of us are alone in terms of some of the weather that we're experiencing. But the number one thing that I want to mention about media and our weather is that it's not documented always very well. But in some cases, when you do your research, you can see something quite important. So there was a local Abbotsford resident that did a quote with Global News Vancouver on November 19th, and her statement was, all over the world, including here in Canada, the impact of severe weather fueled by climate change are becoming impossible to ignore. These weather extremes are causing people to have feelings of stress, anxiety, and hopelessness over our ever-changing planet. And then Global News shared that same comment in their story on December 12th. And because that statement, no matter where you are, resonates the same. Okay, so this is a slide, so I know I can kind of keep an eye on the time. That's what I am doing, knowing that this is an hour presentation. So I'm coming up to the end of my slides. So I really want to go through this as much as possible so I can allow for some questions at the end. this word mitigation has been an important word that we're all talking about. How do we get through this? Like, how do we figure out what path to take? What are the best practices that we should do? Because we feel that from the news, it is all gloom and doom, but climate is fluid like water. It changes and it can be unpredictable, especially when I give the example from that flooding, you know, in southern British Columbia. Some of that water came from the state of Washington. So water is fluid, such as climate, and we need to somehow mitigate it. But I want to start to use that word sustainability or sustainable, because no matter what we're dealing with right now, whether it can be negative in terms of the outlook, we need to find some positives and use those, use some of that information that we are gathering through our CD Saturday weekends or our weeks to kind of get us through. So I'm saying go back to basics and use your tried and true methods. I have a few dates in mind, which I think can be quite universal within the country, depending on where you are and your microclimates. That is, one is March 15th and May 15th. March 15th, I would plant my tomatoes inside, and in May 15th, I'd put them outside. But when I go to point 3 on here, plant with your confidence on May 15th, let's say, with your tomatoes, but have your backup plans. And if that means a tomato cage located, and if you plant your tomatoes by your house, put a plastic bag on it. Those plants will at least produce some fruit early for you, depending on your tomato variety, but have your backup plans. If you find that the weather is really warm one week and you think you can probably seed your spinach or your cold hardy crops, and then they're doing well, and all of a sudden there is a Arctic airflow and the temperature drops, and then all of a sudden your poor little baby plants have passed away, seed again. Just make sure you have some backup plans. Just don't think like this isn't working for me. Have some confidence. And I also will always say, raise up your garden beds at least a few centimeters, even more. Compaction is a major thing when it comes to our weather, whether it be really dry conditions where the soil just starts to get dry, get just sort of sandy, or if there's lots of rains, you'll notice that your soil packs become lower. Keep raising up your garden beds through the use of heavy mulch, whether that be leaves, wood chips, newspaper, wood shavings, mature manure. Do anything you can to add to your soil, which could essentially, this point could complement any other soil talk you've had throughout your own CD weekend or your week, or your event. And it's just the simple fact you need to avoid bare soils, because nothing is more damaging to your plants in terms of dehydration and water loss is bare soils. That will do it for you. Also, you will notice if you go into any garden centers this season that any water timers on your that you want to get for your drip irrigation the prices will start to go up, because people are starting to realize that we need to invest more in our watering methods and research that. But if you can grab a timer, or if you are hand watering, do it really at the end of the stalk and target your water. And a comment on this is everybody has different methods for growing their own edible crops. I will find that in some trials where you have lack of water, we've had that here, and we're the wet coast, we haven't had the same participation within a consistent period. So we're having to work in drought conditions as well. If you just plant your seeds, water them in, we could actually have greater success with direct seed kale rather than transplants, because the water goes right into that seed and into the root system, whereas transplants, it's more or less surface on your soil, and that water has a little bit more of a challenging time getting to your root system. So knowing that. And I am an advocate for compost, and this goes into the heavy mulching, because essentially that's decomposition. And any soils that you have invested in is going to be helping retain water and moisture. And if we're having issues with our water supply and our local water challenges, this is going to be key to get us through. And I'll give an example that I had planted some sunflower plants and I heavily mulched them with cardboard, newspaper, and wood chips. It became a sponge for a lot of excessive rains, but I also didn't have to water them completely because all of that additional extra carbon material held in the moisture, and my sunflowers did fantastic. I also will say become a water steward, save water in your house and reuse your gray water. Just know what you're using your gray water for and what you have put into it before you start to use it on any of your indoor or outdoor plants. And I think this comes down to just having a new lifestyle in terms of gardening. That's just what I think we have to do, and that can be attached to just being more sustainable overall. And that's the end of my slide. So I will say, attached to this too, before we go into questions, is that heat domes, especially that what we've had, was the biggest success to adding to our seed library for our local CD Saturday here in Langley, to the point where we can start donating to other seed libraries within British Columbia. Normally with saving seed, especially with our root crops, you need them to be within the ground for a 2-year period for, again, let's say that carrot top to start to produce, a flower, and then, seeds within that. And yeah, that stays in the ground over winter. At some points, we didn't have to do that this year. We just did it within, a period of 6 months. And then we ripened, we strained them through, and then we did some testing. So we actually had some seeds that came up a lot faster and earlier than normally what we would have. So there's points where you can start to defy some of the things that you're normally thinking of, but as long as you can go in with some confidence and do some slight changes within your growing patterns, I'm thinking that's really going to help us. Knowing what all of the stuff that we had gone through, getting that award for the biggest news headlines, I think it's important to start to keep your basics, but start to do some experimentation, because I think that's going to be the key. Okay, so Helen, I'm on 50 minutes, so I hope I did okay.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. And if you do have questions, anybody, just put them in the chat. That you'll find the function at the bottom of the screen if you just scroll your mouse over it. And then you can ask your questions in there. And watching that presentation, there were some things that drew my attention. One of them was like, you're right, all these new terms we're using that I have never heard them before, like heat dome, and I actually, the Rex X, was that what you called it? I had never.
That's what we're calling it now until it's defined. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, it's been a whirlwind of learning all these new words, like with COVID, all these new words as they pertain to technology. We're all online, and those are new words, but then climate change is bringing in a whole new vocabulary for most people. So it's kind of an interesting, if it wasn't so catastrophic, it's an interesting time to live.
No, so I know that because I hit on so many topics, whether it comes from carbon sequestration to the flooding to patterns. I hope that everybody got some information, if they didn't already know it before, or maybe it validated some of their thoughts. But that's where Seeds of Diversity really wanted me to start to bring in some provinces and kind of get some more education and outreach to the rest of Canada, whatever level you're at.
So you've focused on individual gardeners, but do you happen to know if large scale farmers are adapting, or, because it takes a lot longer to turn around a 100-acre farm than it does my little 4 raised garden beds out in the backyard. So, do you know if they're able to adapt as easily and as readily as the backyard gardener?
Yes, I work all closely with the BC Ministry of Agriculture, and then also with the Ministry of Environment, which is more of a federal level across the country. And there are a lot of, at least at the large scale farming level, they're getting a lot more support now from the local ministry offices, and a lot more grants to be able to navigate through. There's more funding that they can be getting, and there is more agri-service talks being done at that large level of our larger farms. It depends. So I think more or less some of the concentration is the areas with flooding, but every province actually has their own amount of funding. So you need to just sort of figure out exactly what is, if the province of Ontario has some specific weather challenges that has affected them, their own local ministry will be starting to figure out, okay, what do we need to support? Because food security is becoming very, very important and a highlight to even those large farmers, not even just to our local food security, but what we're also exporting to the US and Europe.
Mhm. And what they're importing back to us too. So it's
Yeah, we're hoping to get more input, but we're having a transportation problem right now, and some of that's not due to COVID. Well, it's due to COVID most of the time, but yeah.
and as somebody commented in the chat, the importance of soil health is becoming more recognized as a means of carbon sequestration. So yeah, we have to.
Well, I know that a lot of gardeners keep their areas, like they even farmers, they think that farms need to be nice and neat and clean. They don't, and the more often than not, if you leave everything within the ground and if you use natural sources into your soil, whether that it be your green waste or perfect examples of carbon, which would be again those dry ingredients adding to your soil, you're going to get not only your earthworms doing that work, but it just brings everything back into the soil. Bare soils is probably one of the worst things we could ever have, because there's no water retention, and there's no use of natural resources to put back into the earth.
Yes, and as anybody knows who's ever had bare soil, Mother Nature doesn't like that. She'll throw something on there, and it's going to be something you don't want.
Yes. Yes. No, I think that there are that's why I wanted to give more of a hopeful message. It's just like education and confidence is going to be the best thing. So any talk that you may have experienced through your event or anything that you have access to is probably going to be one of the best resources. And when you start to notice the themes, it just goes back into what we've always done before, but have the confidence to do it. I think that we can still mitigate through. And I knowing that I'm working with our local government, they're doing what they can. Mm-hmm. And they're also just, who would have thought that the entire ministry office in British Columbia for agriculture has been deployed for 2 months dealing with flooding in BC. Mm-hmm. That's what they were doing. So they're doing what they can, but they don't know, they don't have a forecast of what's going to happen next month. And doing any sort of planning for weather or meteorologist are having more of a difficult time than ever trying to have a 7-day target for your weather outlook than they ever have before.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's such an important topic to discuss, and we're so glad you could come out. It's not live, but we really appreciate. Well, it's better because you were able to join us. I'm not sure you would have been able to fly out to Halton.
No, this is probably as live as what I could do, and at least all the information is up to date is what I can offer.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. So thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can always just send Helen a message. But I am going on vacation starting tomorrow, and I'm going to Death Valley, California, which is the lowest, driest, and coldest area of California in the desert. And when I get back, I will email some links and some other resources to Helen, and then she can hopefully post them within the network.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And to everybody who's joined us here, stay tuned. At 4 o'clock, we have another cooking class. This is making nutrient-dense meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we'll see you at 4. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.